stand before you today, I wish not to offer you a lecture in the narrow sense of the word, but rather a journey into the soul, a descent into the hidden corridors where your own truth has been waiting for you all along. I speak not merely of types and categories, though I shall use them as symbolic doors. I speak not merely of INTJ or INFJ as dry letters from a typology, but as signs, mystical inscriptions pointing toward the living drama of the psyche, which is always at work within you, shaping the way you see, the way you feel, and the way you suffer. When we speak of empaths who carry within themselves the essence of the introverted, intuitive, we are not discussing statistics or psychological trivia. We are confronting the mystery of what it means to be called into deep perception, into an intimacy with the unseen, into a sensitivity that borders on the unbearable. You see, when a human being carries this archetypal structure, what modern typology calls the INFJ or the INTJ, it is not simply that they are introverts who prefer solitude or intuitives who dream in abstractions. No, it is as if their very being has been tuned to a frequency that most others cannot hear, like a radio catching signals from a realm just beyond the veil. They perceive what lies underneath appearances. They taste the shadows behind the words, and they absorb, often unwillingly, the currents of feeling that move invisibly between people. To be such a person is both a gift and a wound, and if you are such a one, you already know what I mean. For your life has been marked by a certain burden, the sense that you are living not only your own emotions, but the unspoken sorrows of the collective. The empathic quality of the intuitive introvert is not a sentimental virtue, it is a psychic necessity born of the architecture of their soul. When the introverted intuitive function dominates, it does not move in the realm of the obvious, it sinks beneath. It dissolves appearance, and it dwells in symbols, in images, in the deep language of the unconscious. Such a person cannot help but feel the myth beneath the mundane. You may be sitting with a friend who smiles and says, "I am fine," and yet you feel, without knowing how, the subtle tremor of despair in their chest, as though your own body were echoing their hidden cry. This is the empathic intuition that no one speaks of, because it is not about words or gestures, it is about the silent resonance between souls. But I must warn you, this gift is dangerous. It is dangerous because it makes you vulnerable not only to the beauty of human depth, but also to the poisons that leak out of the collective shadow. An INFJ or INTJ empath will often feel exhausted in crowds, not because they are shy, but because their psychic skin is porous. They walk into a room, and it is as though 1,000 unacknowledged stories are poured into them, unfiltered, unasked for. They carry the archetypes of healer and seer, but also of scapegoat and exile. And if they do not learn to recognize this, they risk drowning in energies that are not their own. In my clinical work, I saw this again and again. The most gifted intuitives were often the most tormented because they had not yet distinguished between what belonged to them and what belonged to the other. They would say, "I feel so anxious, so heavy, so guilty." But when we probed deeper, it became clear that these emotions were not always their own. They were absorbing the psychic atmosphere of those around them, sometimes even of their family system or the wider society. It is as if the unconscious chooses them as vessels, asking them to carry what others cannot bear. And here is the paradox. They can bear it, but only if they learn the art of alchemy, the art of transforming shadow into insight, pain into meaning. Consider for a moment the archetype of the wounded healer. This ancient image, present in Chiron the centaur and in Christ on the cross, reveals that one becomes a healer not by being free of wounds, but by entering into them so deeply that one learns how to guide others through their own. The empathic intuitive is drawn into the same fate. Their sensitivity is their wound, but it is also the very source of their capacity to see what others cannot without the wound. They would be blind to the mysteries of the soul without the burden. They would never become the vessel through which light can pass. Do you see? Your pain is not merely personal, it is archetypal, and when you carry it consciously, you no longer drown in it, you become initiated by it. But most of you have not been told this truth. Society tells you that you are too sensitive, that you should harden yourself, that you should not feel so deeply, or perhaps it praises your intuition, but expects you to use it only in pragmatic, shallow ways, to predict trends or make clever insights, rather than to dive into the depths of the collective unconscious. And so you walk through life feeling misunderstood, torn between the clarity of your vision and the loneliness of carrying it. You are an empath, yes, but in the deepest sense, you are an oracle for the unspoken, a vessel of what lies beyond words. I want you to imagine for a moment a dream. In this dream, you are standing in a vast cathedral. The stained glass windows are glowing with colors that shift like living flames. You feel the silence pressing against your skin. And then you hear whispers, not from one voice, but from many, all speaking at once. They are the voices of the congregation, of the ancestors, of the forgotten. And you realize that they are not outside you, they are inside you. You are the cathedral, and their voices echo in your bones. This is what it is like to be an INFJ or INTJ empath. You are not separate from the collective. You are its mirror, its vessel, and the danger is that you forget your own voice in the midst of the chorus. The task then is individuation. This is always the central task in my work, the becoming of who you are, not in imitation of others, not in conformity to roles, but in fidelity to the inner self. For the empath, individuation requires learning boundaries, not the crude boundaries of walls, but the subtle ones of discernment. You must learn to ask, is this feeling mine, or is it borrowed from the field around me? You must learn to descend into your own unconscious, to face your own shadow, so that you can distinguish it from the shadows of others. Otherwise, you risk becoming a ghost who carries the pain of the world without ever touching your own soul. And yet, let me tell you something that may sound strange. Your empathy is also a bridge to the divine. For when you feel the sorrow of another, you are not merely engaging in psychology. You are touching the archetypal field where all souls are united. You are participating in what mystics have always known, that the boundaries between self and other are, at their root, illusions. In empathy, you feel this truth. Though it overwhelms you, you feel the unity of the human condition, the one suffering expressed in 1,000 forms. And if you can carry this consciously, you will discover not only compassion but also wisdom. For in the end, empathy is not only about feeling, it is about knowing. It is gnosis, a deep knowledge of the interconnectedness of all being. I must tell you also of the danger of projection. For those who feel so much, the temptation is always to project one's own shadow onto the other, to mistake one's own unacknowledged pain for the pain of the collective. This is why dream work is so essential. Your dreams are the laboratory of the unconscious. They show you the symbols that belong to your own soul, so that you can separate them from the burdens you have absorbed. If you dream of drowning, of being lost in a flood of water, you may be seeing your own struggle with boundaries, your own need to find a solid ground in the midst of emotions. If you dream of carrying a heavy object, perhaps it is the weight of ancestral trauma that has been handed to you. These dreams are not random, they are messages, guides, invitations to know yourself. I say to you, do not flee from your dreams, for they are the royal road to individuation. They will teach you how to distinguish what belongs to you and what does not. They will reveal the archetypes that shape your life, the sage, the healer, the exile, the prophet. And when you honor these images, you give form to what was once formless. This is how you survive as an empath, by giving shape through symbol to what would otherwise drown you. When you dream, you are not alone. You are in dialogue with the unconscious, which is the voice of the self, the spark of the divine within you. The truth that no one tells you about the INFJ and INTJ empath is this: you are not weak for feeling too much. You are chosen for it. Chosen not in some sentimental sense, but in the archetypal sense. You are called to be a mediator between worlds, between the conscious and the unconscious, between the individual and the collective. This calling is never easy. It is crucifixion before it is resurrection. It is descent into Hades before it is ascent into light. But if you walk this path consciously, you will discover the immense power hidden in your sensitivity. For your intuition is not merely private talent, it is the eye of the self looking through you. And your empathy is not merely personal kindness, it is the pulse of the archetypal heart beating in your chest. So let us begin to walk further into this mystery. Let us peel back the layers and examine what lies beneath this type, this temperament, this calling. You are not simply an introvert, nor merely a feeler or a thinker. You are a vessel of the unconscious, a bearer of symbols, an alchemist of suffering, and it is time that you knew the truth about your own soul. When I speak of the empathic, intuitive, I am not speaking of a rare curiosity or some delicate flower of temperament. I am speaking of an archetype that has always existed, though under many guises. The shamans of old were empaths in the truest sense, for they carried the wounds of their tribes and journeyed into the other worlds to find healing. The prophets of Israel were empaths, feeling the agony of a people estranged from their God. The mystics who withdrew into monasteries were empaths, not because they wished to escape the world, but because the world had already lodged itself so deeply within them that solitude became the only space where they could discern the voice of the divine from the noise of humanity. The INFJ and INTJ empath belongs to this same lineage, though modern society has forgotten the language to name them. Instead, they are labeled as too much or too intense, and their gifts are diminished into quirks. But the soul knows better. The soul knows it has been chosen for initiation. What is initiation if not a descent? You must understand this clearly. The path of the empath is not linear, not a straight ascent into light. It begins in confusion, in the overwhelming chaos of being unable to tell where you end and the world begins. You remember moments in your youth when you felt strange, when you noticed things others did not, when you cried for sorrows that were not yours, when you retreated into imagination because reality was too raw. This was the beginning of your initiation, though no one told you so. Perhaps your family scolded you for being sensitive. Perhaps you were told to grow a thicker skin, and perhaps you tried, but found that no matter how you armored yourself, the voices still seeped through, the emotions still entered, the dreams still pulled you into depths that others avoided. You were being led, not away from your gift, but deeper into it. The INTJ and INFJ, though often confused in modern typology, carry subtle distinctions in how they bear this gift. The INFJ tends toward feeling as the bridge it is through the heart that their intuition manifests, a compassion that borders on clairvoyance, a capacity to sense the emotions of another as though they were their own. The INTJ, by contrast, channels the same archetypal current through thought, through vision, through strategic foresight, yet do not mistake this difference as opposition. Both are variations of the same root. Introverted intuition, both are drawn not to the surface of life, but to the hidden pattern beneath it. Both carry empathy, though the INFJ may feel it in the blood, while the INTJ maps it in the mind. And both are vulnerable to being misunderstood, for their truth is not visible to the ordinary eye. Imagine again a dream. You are standing in a forest at night. The trees are tall, black pillars stretching into the sky. A wind moves through them, carrying voices you cannot quite hear. You feel alone, and yet not alone. Every rustle is a presence, every shadow a suggestion of something more. This is the inner life of the intuitive empath, the awareness that reality is layered, that every gesture conceals an archetype, that every silence hums with meanings unseen. The forest is never empty, and while others walk through it unaware, you feel each presence, each echo, each whisper. It is both wonder and burden. For beauty and terror dwell side by side in the forest of the psyche. Now let us speak of the shadow, for there is no individuation without it. The empath's shadow often takes the form of self-erasure. You give and you give until nothing remains of your own essence. You become so accustomed to carrying the emotions of others that you forget you have the right to your own. You sacrifice your will on the altar of harmony And when you can no longer bear it, you withdraw completely, isolating yourself in order to survive. Thus, the empath lives between extremes, over identification with the other and complete withdrawal from the other. This pendulum is the symptom of a shadow not yet integrated. You must learn that empathy is not absorption, it is resonance. Yes, but resonance requires a center, a self that can vibrate without dissolving. The shadow teaches you this by pushing you into exhaustion, into despair, until you are forced to ask, who am I beneath all this? The answer does not come easily. It comes through confrontation with the unconscious. The empath must dream, must journal, must create, must wrestle with the symbols that rise from within. When you see in a dream that you are carrying a child that is not yours, you must ask, what part of me is burdened with the undeveloped emotions of others? When you dream of drowning, ask, where am I lost in the flood of collective feeling? When you dream of wandering alone on a mountain, ask, where is my solitude demanding to be honored? Each dream is a mirror, showing you the dynamics you live unconsciously, and by bringing them into consciousness, you begin to separate yourself from the other. This is the path to becoming a true empath, not a martyr. The INFJ and INTJ empaths also wrestle with another shadow, the temptation to control. Because they perceive so deeply, they often see the outcomes of situations long before others do. They sense the unconscious motivations behind behavior, and in their frustration, they may attempt to steer, to manipulate, to direct others toward what they know will be best. But when empathy turns into control, it becomes tyrannical. The gift of intuition must never override the autonomy of the other. This is perhaps the hardest lesson for the intuitive empath, to witness the unfolding of another's path without intervening, to carry the knowledge of suffering without rushing to solve it, to trust the self of the other as much as one trusts one's own. Without this restraint, empathy becomes possession, and the archetype of healer collapses into the archetype of manipulator. And yet, when this balance is achieved, what radiates from the empath is nothing short of luminous. You have seen it in certain rare individuals. They walk into a room and, without saying much, they create an atmosphere of depth, of safety, of authenticity. Others begin to confess truths they had never spoken. Tears flow without shame. The empath has created a sacred space, not by force but by presence. This is the true vocation of the INFJ and INTJ empath, to embody the presence of the self so fully that others are invited to meet their own, not to save, not to absorb, but to mirror the divine image within each soul. I recall the words of Meister Eckhart, who said that the soul is not at home until it finds its ground in God. For the empath, the equivalent is this: you will not find peace until you anchor yourself in the self, in the archetype of wholeness that transcends the ego. All the empathy in the world will drown you if you do not root yourself in that inner ground. But when you do, your empathy becomes something more than feeling. It becomes wisdom. You no longer confuse your compassion with compulsion. You no longer carry burdens that are not yours. Instead, you become a living bridge, a mediator between the conscious and the unconscious, between the individual and the collective, and this is your true gift. Let me tell you of another dream. For dreams are the language of the empath. A woman once told me she dreamt of standing on a shore, watching waves crash against the rocks. In her hands, she held a lantern. As the waves grew stronger, she feared the lantern would go out, but when she looked closely, she saw that the flame did not flicker. It grew brighter. No matter how violent the sea became, she woke with tears. This dream revealed her truth, that no matter how overwhelming the emotions of the world, there is within her a flame that cannot be extinguished. That flame is the self, and as long as she holds to it, she can face any storm without being destroyed. This is the secret every empath must discover. Without it, you remain a victim of tides. With it, you become a lighthouse for others. I tell you also of archetypes, for they shape the empath's journey. Whether you are aware of them or not, the healer, the seer, the hermit, the prophet, these figures live within the psyche of the intuitive empath. They call you into solitude, into insight, into service. But they also carry the shadows. The healer may become the martyr, the seer may become the manipulator, the hermit may become the exile, the prophet may become the fanatic. These shadows are not punishments, they are invitations. They force you to confront the limits of your empathy, the danger of inflation, the temptation to identify with archetypal power rather than with your human soul. To be an empath is to live close to archetypes and therefore close to the fire. You must respect this fire, or it will consume you in the end. The truth that no one tells you about INFJ and INTJ empaths is that your gift is not about absorbing pain, it is about transforming it. You are not meant to be a sponge, endlessly soaking up the suffering of the world. You are meant to be an alchemist, transmuting suffering into meaning, despair into vision, shadow into light. This is why you feel so much, because you are called to translate the unconscious into consciousness, to make the invisible visible, to articulate what others cannot name. This is not weakness, this is vocation. This is your path to individuation. And though it is heavy, it is also holy. When you begin to awaken to this truth that you are not here merely to feel, but to transform, you may experience a profound shift. For much of your life you have lived as though empathy were a curse, as though your porous skin were evidence of fragility. You wondered why you could not move through life with the indifference that others seem to manage. You berated yourself for being tired, for withdrawing, for sensing too much. But when you see that your gift is an alchemical one, that you are not absorbing but transmuting, then you begin to stand in your power. The storm still rages around you, but you discover that the self within you is greater than any storm. You no longer identify only with the one who feels, you identify also with the one who witnesses. The eternal center of the psyche, which cannot be drowned. The INTJ and INFJ empath, when individuated, becomes a vessel of vision. The INTJ sees patterns unfolding across time, sensing the direction of history, of movements, of human relationships. Often years before they manifest, they may appear cold to others, for they do not always show the depths of their perception. But this is a misunderstanding. Their empathy lies in their capacity to anticipate, to prepare, to hold a vision that can protect others from dangers they themselves do not yet perceive. The INFJ, by contrast, becomes the vessel of feeling transfigured into wisdom. They embody compassion not as sentimentality but as deep resonance, offering presence that heals without words. The difference is one of expression, but the root is the same. Introverted intuition, the function that perceives the symbolic order beneath appearances, both stand at the threshold of mystery, seeing the archetypes at work in the lives of those around them. And both carry the responsibility of not being swallowed by what they see. This responsibility cannot be overstated, for when one lives so close to the unconscious, the temptation is always toward inflation. You may begin to believe you are omniscient, that your insights make you superior, that your empathy grants you authority over others. This is the trap of the prophet archetype, who, intoxicated by vision, forgets humility. Remember, the unconscious is vast, infinite, divine, and you are but one vessel through which it speaks. To identify with it fully is to fall into possession, to lose yourself in archetypal madness. This is why so many mystics warned against pride, why so many prophets suffered, why so many healers bore wounds that humbled them. Your gift is real, but it is not yours to own. It flows through you from the self, and your task is to remain faithful, not inflated. The empathic intuitive must also learn the discipline of solitude. Without solitude, you cannot discern what is yours from what belongs to others. Without solitude, you cannot listen to the voice of your own unconscious. The world will demand your presence, your care, your listening ear. But you must retreat, not out of rejection, but out of necessity, like Christ withdrawing to the desert, like shamans fasting in caves, like monks entering cloisters. You too must withdraw in order to hear. Solitude is not loneliness for you. It is nourishment. It is the space in which your empathy resets, where you shed what is not yours, where you realign with the self. Do not fear this solitude. Embrace it as initiation. For only in silence can you hear the subtle voice that guides your path. Let me speak now of dreams once more, for they are your greatest allies. Many of you have had dreams that seem prophetic, dreams that reveal truth, later confirmed in waking life. This is not coincidence. The intuitive empath lives close to the archetypal layer of the unconscious, and therefore dreams speak to you in heightened clarity. Pay attention. If you dream of standing at a crossroads, it is the self showing you that a decision lies ahead. Not merely external, but internal. Which archetype will you embody? If you dream of carrying a burden, ask what ancestral or collective weight you are still holding. If you dream of a flood, ask where you are overwhelmed by emotions not your own. If you dream of light shining in darkness, recognize it as the symbol of the self, reminding you that no matter how deep the shadow, the flame within cannot be extinguished. To ignore these dreams is to ignore your soul's guidance. To attend to them is to walk the path of individuation. The empath also wrestles with ancestral shadows. So often you are born into families that do not know how to handle your sensitivity. Sometimes you carry the unprocessed grief of generations, the traumas never spoken, the secrets buried in silence. Without knowing why, you feel shame that is not yours, anger that is not yours, despair that is not yours. These are ancestral burdens seeking expression through you. You must not collapse under them. You must bring them into consciousness. When you sense such emotions, do not ask merely, what is wrong with me? Ask also, whose voice am I hearing? Whose wound am I carrying? Is this the grief of my mother, the silence of my father, the terror of my ancestors who lived through war? In asking these questions, you honor the past without being enslaved by it. You transform ancestral trauma into conscious awareness, and in doing so, you liberate not only yourself but those who came before you. This is sacred work, and it is part of the empath's vocation. But let me tell you of another danger, the danger of exhaustion, of burnout, of despair. Many empaths reach a point where they feel they can no longer go on, where the weight of what they carry seems unbearable. They withdraw, numb themselves, or lose faith. If you are in such a place, I tell you this, do not despise your breaking. For breaking is often the beginning of transformation. Just as a seed must split before it can grow, just as the night must deepen before the dawn, so too must you break in order to find a deeper strength. Your despair is not the end, it is the threshold. If you can hold it consciously, without fleeing, you will discover that beneath the exhaustion lies the inexhaustible flame of the self. It is not your ego that sustains you, it is the archetype of life itself, the eternal force that has carried humanity through every darkness. Trust it, lean on it, surrender to it. It will not abandon you. Consider again a dream. You are standing in a cave, surrounded by darkness. You feel alone, terrified. Suddenly you see a faint light far in the distance. You walk toward it, trembling. As you approach, you realize the light is coming from within your own chest. Reflected on the walls of the cave, the darkness was not an enemy. It was the canvas upon which your inner flame could be revealed. This is the truth of your despair. It is not meant to destroy you, but to reveal the self within you. Do not run from it. Enter it, for only in entering do you discover that you are not as fragile as you feared. You are stronger than the darkness, because you are one with the source of light. In all of this, remember, empathy is not about rescuing. You are not here to save others from their path. You are here to witness, to mirror, to transmute. The moment you believe you must save, you are lost. For you take upon yourself the burden that belongs to the self of the other. Respect their process. Trust their unconscious. Your task is not to remove their suffering, but to reflect the deeper meaning of it, to hold the space where their soul can emerge. This requires patience, humility, and trust. It requires you to release control and to honor mystery. Do not rob others of their initiation by trying to carry it for them. Carry only what is yours, and in doing so, you will empower them to carry their own. This is the truth no one tells you. The empath's gift is not sentimental. It is archetypal, mystical, alchemical. You are not fragile. You are forged by the fire of the unconscious. You are not weak. You are chosen to carry what others avoid. And you are not alone. The self walks with you. The archetypes guide you. The dreams instruct you. The world may not understand you, but the soul does. And when you align with it, you become what you were always meant to be. A vessel of light in a world that has forgotten its own. Now we approach the culmination of this path, the place where the empath realizes that all along they were not simply wandering aimlessly through the chaos of others' feelings, but being shaped into a vessel of individuation. The INFJ and INTJ empath carries within themselves the seed of the self, just as every human being does. But in them, this seed demands an especially difficult soil. Their initiation requires them to face the overwhelming reality of interconnectedness, to suffer it, to be disoriented by it, and then to discover within themselves the boundary, the anchor that transforms empathy into wisdom. And when this happens, when empathy ripens into individuation, a new kind of human emerges, one who does not merely feel the world, but helps redeem it through presence. I tell you this plainly. The world desperately needs empaths who are individuated, for we live in an age of projection, where people hurl their shadows upon each other without reflection, where noise drowns out silence, where sentiment masquerades as compassion, but is often nothing more than a mask for fear. In such a time, the intuitive empath who has found their center becomes like a well in the desert. Others come to drink, though they do not know why. They feel safe, they feel seen, they feel understood. And this is not because the empath has given them solutions, but because the empath has embodied a wholeness that calls forth wholeness in them. This is your true vocation, not to fix, but to embody, not to save, but to mirror, not to absorb, but to transmute, and through this, to become a quiet revolutionary in a world starving for depth. Let us look again at the archetypes, for they are the eternal companions of this path. The healer, when purified of martyrdom, becomes one who channels the energy of the self to mend what is broken without losing themselves. The seer, when humbled, becomes one who shares vision not as control but as guidance, always respecting the autonomy of the other. The hermit, when balanced, becomes one who treasures solitude without rejecting community, who steps out from the cave at the right time to share the fruits of silence. The prophet, when grounded, becomes one who speaks truth not to dominate but to awaken, whose words are fire, yet whose heart is still water. These are the archetypal destinies available to you, and the choice lies in how consciously you walk with them. If you refuse, they possess you. If you accept, they empower you. And what of the shadow that will always remain? Do not think individuation means the annihilation of shadow. No, it means relationship to shadow. The empath will always be tempted toward exhaustion, toward over-identification, toward control, toward despair. These temptations will never fully vanish. But through individuation, you learn to see them not as enemies but as teachers. Each time you feel overwhelmed, you are reminded to return to solitude. Each time you feel the urge to control, you are reminded to trust the self of the other. Each time you feel despair, you are reminded of the inexhaustible flame within. Thus, the shadow becomes a guide, leading you again and again back to the center. You do not transcend your humanity, you integrate it, and this is the only path to wholeness. Let me offer you one final dream. For dreams are the beginning and the end of this journey. Imagine you are in a great hall, surrounded by mirrors. Each mirror reflects not only your face, but countless others, ancestors, strangers, even archetypal figures like the mother, the warrior, the sage. At first, you feel lost, overwhelmed by so many reflections. You cannot tell which is you. But then, in the center of the hall, you see a single mirror glowing with golden light. You approach it and look within. There you see not only your face, but the face of something eternal, luminous, infinite. It is not you, and yet it is you. It is the self, the archetype of wholeness, the divine spark that has always lived within, and suddenly all the other mirrors make sense. They were fragments, partial reflections of this one light. You wake with tears, knowing that you are more than an empath, more than a type, more than a wounded healer. You are an expression of the self incarnate, called to live consciously in a world that has forgotten its soul. This is the truth about INFJ and INTJ empaths that no one tells you. You are initiates of the unconscious. You are bearers of symbols. You are mediators between worlds. Your life will not be easy, for you will always feel more than others, see more than others, wrestle with shadows. Others refuse to acknowledge, but your life can be meaningful beyond measure, for in your very being you carry the possibility of transformation, not only for yourself but for the collective. When you choose to walk this path consciously, you offer the world what it cannot give itself: depth, presence, vision, truth. Do not despise your sensitivity. Do not flee from your empathy. Do not allow the voices of society to convince you that you are weak. You are not weak. You are living close to the source, and though the source wounds as much as it heals, though it burns as much as it comforts, it is also the place where you become who you truly are. Trust it. Trust the self. Trust the dreams. Trust that your empathy is not an accident, but a calling. And remember always, individuation is not a theory. It is a path. It is walked not once, but every day. Each day you discern what is yours and what is not. Each day you return to solitude. Each day you listen for the whisper of the unconscious. Each day you embody the flame that no storm can extinguish. I leave you with this. The gift of empathy is sacred. Guard it, purify it, live it consciously. For if you do, you will discover that what you once thought was a burden is in fact the very way in which the self has chosen to reveal itself through you. And there is no greater destiny than to become transparent to the light of the soul